Live with the first new show of the outdoor news, streaming to Facebook and streaming to YouTube. So we'll see if anybody actually shows up to watch tonight. Who knows? We could have 2 people. We might have 20. We might have 200. But either way, hopefully it'll be a little interesting. And what I'm going to try to do is share some information. Not just fishing tips and bait stuff and all that. I'll do some of that as well. But we're going to talk about different things like the LHSAA and does that affect high school fishing or vice versa. We're going to go over the history of the slot limit on Caddo Lake. We're going to talk about the boat launch sand at Earl G, and we're going to look at some Caddo maps. So in other words, it's not just going to be fishing baits and conditions and all that. It's also going to be going a little deeper dive into some of the fishing topics, surrounding our area. And again, not just related to Caddo. I'm going to spend quite a bit of time on Caddo tonight, of course, because that's where I'm fishing mostly. But we're going to talk about, I don't know, whatever we can think about. So I see we got a few people here. Hello, Trey Harold. Hello, Mr. James Boggs. Good to see y'all both in here tonight. Y'all make sure and tag some friends, text some friends, let them know, hey, there's a live show going on. Check it out. Let's see what it's about. You may get in here and not like it, and that's okay too. That's the beauty of being able to do this on social media. So I'm going to sit here, and the way this is going to work is I'm going to kind of jibber jabber here for a few minutes and kind of ramble on. I've got a 5-minute countdown timer I'm going to play. Okay. And the reason that I do that is it takes about 10 to 12 minutes for most people to get notifications and all that in Facebook. And so I want to make sure and give people plenty of time to find out that it's on. Hello there, Mr. Gunderson. Good to see you this evening. But that gives people plenty of time to know that the show is on, as well as be able to tune in and all that. All right, so I'll tell you what we'll do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start the countdown. So there's going to be a 5-minute countdown going. All right. So this gives folks time enough to go get you something to drink, grab some popcorn, again, tag a friend. That lets me share the show out, and we're going to get started. So I'm going to hit the countdown now. You'll see it on your screen, and just hang out or come back in here in just a second. So here we go. All right, I am back after the 5 minute countdown, and great to see everybody else back as well. So, just a little housekeeping things. Like I said, we do a countdown pretty much every show. Again, that gives more people time to get the notifications in Facebook. I've also got a YouTube channel set up. So, if you go to theoutdoor.news/YouTube, that'll redirect you over to the YouTube channel. It should be, I hadn't checked it yet, but it should be publishing live there as well. So just in case you know somebody that doesn't have a Facebook account, if they want to join in, tell them to go over there and like and subscribe and get notifications. They can watch straight via YouTube as well. All right, so here's the way this is going to work. And I'm kind of making this up as I go along and kind of winging it. But back in the 90s, for some of you that don't know, a good friend of mine, John Brown Jr., and I started a outdoor news television show on Channel 10 out of Monroe. And we started out doing a 5 minute live segment on their morning show every morning. As a matter of fact, Dave Norris, who I don't think Dave's still mayor of West Monroe, but anyway, back then he was mayor of West Monroe. He was also the host, or one of the hosts, on that show. And so we started doing a 5 minute live segment. Long story made short, that eventually led into a full-blown 30-minute television show. So the way that I'm going to format this is kind of like that. We're going to talk about some topics concerning fishing around our area and the region. We're not limited to 5 minutes. I may be here 20 minutes, 30 minutes tonight, maybe a couple hours. Who knows? We'll just talk. But I encourage you to comment. I can see the comment stream. So go ahead and comment if you got questions or topics you want to bring up. I do read those comments. If we can't get them in tonight, we'll certainly put it on the notes for a future show. And that's pretty much how this is going to work. Now, if you want to be a guest on the show, or you've got something you want to come on and actually talk about via a video link, or I'll actually have a call-in number as well. So if you don't have a good cell or data connection, or your computer doesn't have a good internet connection, then I do have a phone number you can call and come in just like a radio show and call in. Hello there, Mr. Paul Funk. Good to see you here this evening. As a matter of fact, Mr. Funk, we need to chat and see what show we're going to have you on, because we want to discuss the Funkbuster Team Trail, as well as some of the good stuff that y'all have going on over there at Funkbuster Baits. So anyway, if you want to join the show, just send me a message. I'll check that out later. If you've got my cell phone number, shoot me a text message or whatever. And anyway, that's how it's going to work. So I plan on having plenty of guests. This is kind of the introductory show, and just kind of feeling it out and seeing how it's going to go. All right, so let's kind of get started. So first thing I've got listed here is Caddo maps. And back on April the 1st, which was, I didn't even think about it when I released it, actually April Fool's Day, I decided to go ahead and release my high-res scans of the Atlantic Mapping Incorporated waterproof map that I purchased from Drift In Landing several years ago. Now, the reason that I went ahead and released this is I understand the copyright issues and all that, but AMI is out of business. I did try to reach out to them and wasn't able to get in touch with anybody. Their company is actually dissolved, according to the Secretary of State of Georgia. And so I went ahead and decided to release it because we're going to be doing some lessons in the future, future episodes or future shows of the Outdoor News on Caddo Lake. And having a digital copy of that map is going to be instrumental in that. So for those of you that aren't able to scan your own map, I've provided digital copies for the learning environment. Now, if you don't have a copy of that map, then if you go to the Outdoor News page, I've got it posted there. And give me a second here, and I'm going to actually pull this up. I also posted it in the Caddo Lake Fishing Report Facebook group. So if you're not a member of that and you fish Caddo, I highly recommend that you go over there and join that group. It can be very interesting sometimes, but there's a lot of good information shared there. So let's see here. Give me a second. Let me actually pull up the browser shot. There we go. Okay. So one of the other things I like to do in these live shows is be pretty interactive and show websites, and I've got screenshots, a couple of videos we're going to watch and all that sort of thing. I even have a phone call we're going to listen to here in a bit. But you can see this post right here. This, again, is in the Caddo Lake Fishing Report Facebook group, so you can just search for that and then request membership. There's about 7,300 members in it right now. And if you just look for this post, I did a little video here. All right. Okay, and so what that video is showing you is how to actually do those. So what I did was I posted links to those maps, and then what you need to do, they're actually Dropbox links, but if you'll tap and hold on those links and save the photo to your phone, don't do a screenshot of it, actually save those photos. They're very high res, and you can pinch and zoom and scroll way into those. As a matter of fact, I have a copy of those. So let's see here. Give me a second. I'm kind of jumping around in my notes here, but bear with me. I have copies of those that I'm going to show you here. Let's see. This is going to be, what cut is that? I guess I need to get a little more prepared here. All right, here we go. Yeah. Cut 5. All right, so this is going to be the Louisiana side, and I can only zoom in so far, but even on your phone you can pinch and zoom in, and those maps are very high res. It gives you the names, gives you the boat lane markers, channel markers, and shows it real well. So it's not a substitute for having a Lake Master map or whatever, but it does correspond to that very well and actually shows you a lot more detail so that you can learn some of the names of these places where we talk about and then reference that on your GPS system. But there's the Louisiana side, and then of course I've got the Texas side as a separate map. So I encourage you to go either over to the Caddo Lake Fishing Report group or just go to the Outdoor News and scroll down. You'll see that same post and video. It was back on April the 1st, and you'll see those links there. If you have any trouble downloading those maps, just reach out via Facebook Messenger or whatever, and I'll be glad to help you out. If you need me to email them to you, I can do that. Just Facebook Messenger me with your email address, and I can send them one at a time because they're about 12 megs each. All right. So let's take a look and see who all is on here. Y'all let me know, can y'all see everything relatively well? I know some of that type is going to be small, especially if you're coming in on a phone. That's okay. But let me know if you can hear me fine, if you can kind of see the screen fine. And again, I encourage you, if you have any questions, put them in the comments, because I am trying to monitor those as well as, well, you know, keep the show going on at the same time. All right. So again, now I did contact Drift In. Thank you there, Mr. Gallman. I did contact Drift In. I contacted Bacon's Tackle, and I called Buzzard Bay before I released those maps, because I didn't want to release the maps if they were sitting on, you know, a handful of the printed maps that they needed to sell. Drift In, now this is a, you know, again, back on April the 1st, but Drift In said that they thought they had one on the shelf. So if you want the waterproof paper version, I keep one of those in my boat. Run on over there to Drift In. You know, they're right there where they're working on the Highway 1 bridge construction. So anyway, run over there, and I would encourage you to buy that last map from them if they have it in stock. Call them first. All right. So I want to show you a video that I hadn't released this yet, and I want to show it here at the beginning of the show and see if you can guess what it is. And Pat, I know you were fishing with me, so no giving it away in the comments yet. Let's let everybody else kind of guess about this. But let me roll this video and see if y'all can figure out what this is. This is actually one of those things I had never really experienced before in all my years of fishing, but I thought it was cool. And this was around Big Green Break, which, you know, no surprise there. I've been bed fishing over there for a couple of weeks or a couple of weekends. And I saw this 2 days in a row. So y'all let me know in the comments, what do you think these are? And if you pay close attention, you'll get a pretty good hint here in just a second, the magnifying glass. All right, so John McKay says catfish ball. Chet says baby fry. So y'all watch close. But the key is, what kind of fry are they? Now, if you look close, you're going to see that fish. watching the magnifying glass. She actually came up and challenged the boat, kind of like a smallmouth when you're bed fishing smallmouth, if you've ever done that, like up in Arkansas or Missouri. And then she went back into the ball of fry and watch as they move around her. This was the craziest thing I'd ever seen. She was actually protecting this school of fry, and they were following her movements. Yeah, I thought it was cool too, Paul. I literally never seen this before in 30 plus years of fishing, nearly 40 years of fishing. All right. So y'all kind of think about it. I'm going to release that video later on, on the Facebook page and all that, just as a standalone clip. And I will let y'all know exactly what it is. We'll come back and I'll play the video and freeze frame it, and you'll be able to see for sure what it is. All right. I've also got the water conditions. I've got the level at 169.6. That's the lake level according to the Maps Online deal. I guessed at the water temperature being 72, 74. I was up there, let's see, what day was it? Saturday for a few hours. And it was about 72 degrees mostly where I was, so I'm kind of guessing with that. If any of y'all have been on the lake today or yesterday, let me know what the surface temp was. Okay, so let's move on. So we've discussed the Caddo maps, and let me kind of check off my little list here so I can keep up with everything. I've showed you a cool video of some kind of fish fry. Could very well be catfish. But now I want to move on to another topic, and this is the sand at the Earl G boat launch. Has anybody else experienced the problem with the Earl G boat ramp lately? If you have, let me know in the comments. So let me get over here and let's take a look at this. So I need to go over here. I need to turn that off. And of course, I'm having to not only host the show right now, but produce it. And again, you can kind of see I've got my empty guest slots sitting there. So probably the next show I'll have a guest on. But the problem is right here, if you take a look, so this is just off of Google Maps, so this is not necessarily up to date, but it gives a good representation of what's going on. And if you look on both the left side here and the right side, if you're on the water side of the ramp, the sand and the silt are just crazy. So when we had the junior state tournament there for the junior kids, and even on the high school side the next day, because I was helping some folks launch then, it was a real problem because I don't know if you've noticed, but if you go to Earl G, you can get 2 boats on the ramp real easy right there. But the challenge, it's plenty wide enough, but the challenge is if your boats, if you back down on the far left or back down on the far right, that sand on either side will tend to kick your trailer up it's about a foot. Well, that puts your trailer and your fender well and your bunks on that side at a weird angle. So getting your boat dumped off of there or loading your boat up later gets to be a real challenge. So if anybody knows who directly to reach out and contact, I know the Caddo Lake Commission and by extension the Parks and Recreation are responsible for Earl G as well as the channel markers on the Louisiana side. Who do we reach out to directly? Now, a good friend of mine's Mario Chavez. He's on the Caddo Commission. Sent an email to him this weekend, so he hadn't responded yet, on, who do we contact to get somebody to come out there and dredge or clean that out? Let's see. Yep. Let's see. Let me put a couple of comments up here. So, yeah, John says, yep, needs cleaned out. There's no doubt about that. Let's see. Dan Fulgham, thank you, Dan. He says, in the past, we have had no problem getting it cleaned if we let them know. Doug Rainwater, very responsive. Awesome. Well, Dan, can you reach out to him or shoot me a message with Doug's phone number? I'll be glad to reach out to him. And, they may not be aware, but you really can't effectively get 2 boats in there right now. It's a pain in the rear, even if, you know what you're doing. So anyway, so I just wanted to get a little bit of a gripe session about that. And that's one of the things about the show, like I said at the beginning, is it's not just going to be about fishing baits and, what's the cool thing to use right now on various lakes and all that. We're going to be discussing some of these other issues that we all talk about at the boat ramps and weigh-ins, but we don't seem to be able to get it out there publicly. And so this is one of them. I'll see if I can get Doug Rainwater's contact information and reach out to Doug. Or Dan, if you can, that would be great. And let's see if we can get them to come clean that out. That'll help a lot, especially during the tournaments. I've got some news, but I can't really announce it yet, that we may have a pretty good-sized tournament coming up in July. And anyway, we'll get to all that later. All right. So let's see what else we've got on our list here. Caddo maps we've covered. The Caddo boat launch sand we've covered. And now we get to move into one of the fun ones, removing the slot. Now, I'm sure this is a little, I don't really want to say controversial, but I'm sure people are on both sides of the fence of whether the slot is good for Caddo or whether the slot needs to be removed, if it needs to be adjusted, or whatever. Here's my stance on it. And I've talked to Jeff Sibley with Wildlife and Fisheries as well. A lot of you probably know Jeff. He's a biologist there, great guy. And so we were discussing the slot, and he said, well, one of the issues is that Texas doesn't really seem to be willing to remove the slot. Well, here's the problem with the slot. For the slot to work, you have to keep a certain amount of fish over the slot and a certain amount of fish under the slot. And I don't know about y'all, but I probably hadn't kept and cleaned a bass in 25 or 30 years. And I always tell the story of why I don't like to clean fish anymore. But, it's kind of a religion with me. But I don't fault anybody if they want to keep a fish and over. It's their legal right. And really and truly, it needs to happen for proper management. There was a guy in the Caddo Lake Fishing Report that, and a couple of the other Facebook groups that posted one. I think it was about 10 pounds a couple of weeks ago. And, of course, there were the naysayers of, you shouldn't have killed the fish and all that. But I didn't look at it that way. Most of us release the overs anyway. All right, so, my vote would be to remove the slot. Now, here's the other proof, is they pulled the slot off of Caddo Lake down at Chatham, Jonesboro and Chatham, I forget when, but several years ago, and Caney is now continuing to produce bigger and bigger fish, especially since the hydrilla is back. Now, I'm not saying removing the slot started the big fish production again, but it's certainly not hurting it because, again, even if you have the slot, if nobody's keeping the fish over, and not very many people keep a lot of unders for that matter, then there's zero use in having the slot. Now, you can argue, well, look at Lake Fork, but the counter argument to that is, I bet you if they took the slot off of Lake Fork would continue to produce big fish simply because, again, it's pretty much a religion over there. So I see a couple of comments coming in. Y'all let me know what you think about the slot. We're fixing to take a look at the history of the slot to try to do a little education for those of you that don't know. And honestly, I didn't know the whole history of it on Caddo until I started looking it up. But Eddie Hyatt Jr. says the thing about the slot is you will have 15, 16 pounds with 5 fish of slots. That is true. But I'm going to show you here in a minute some video from the Lady Bass Anglers Association, their championship a couple of years ago, where they used paper fish. And so just keep that in mind. We're going to take a look at that. All right. So let me catch up on my notes right here, and let's see. All right. So let's see. 10, 11. Give me just a second here, and let me take a look at this. All right. And I'll get caught up. I got some screenshots that I want to show you, and we'll proceed from there. All right, so that's Earl G ramp. Yeah, here we go. All right. And again, I realize some of this may not be easy to read if you're coming in on mobile because the font's a little small, but don't worry about it. I'm going to help you through it. So this is just a timeline that I made. So basically, back in 1985, Louisiana and Texas met to try to unify the length limit and creel limit. Louisiana at that time had a 15-inch bass creel with no length limit. And again, this is on Caddo. And Texas had a 10-inch minimum length with a 10 bass creel. So that was 1985. They decided to meet, and they couldn't come to an agreement. So they kept the mixed bag. In 1987, they did meet, or they met again, and they decided, or they agreed on a 12-inch minimum length. Again, this is cattle only. And Texas implemented the 12-inch minimum in 87. Louisiana implemented the 12-inch minimum length on cattle in 1988. All right, so now we jump up to April 1990. Again, just kind of following up the chart here. Let me put that there so you can kind of follow along. All right, April of 1990. Texas and Louisiana, Texas Parks and Wildlife, Louisiana Wildlife and Fisheries met, and they agreed to go to a 14-inch minimum length with an 8 bass creel. So they're staying in unison in 1990. No slot limit yet, but at least a 14-inch minimum length. And in 1992, Texas and Louisiana both agreed on a slot limit, but there was a little bit of a difference. So Texas had a 14, or decided on a 14 to 18 slot, which is what Caddo has now, with a 3 bass creel, and Louisiana decided on a 14 to 17-inch slot with a 10 bass creel. So we got a slot implemented, but they kind of diverged a little bit as far as having a unified, slot limit, a reciprocal agreement. Yeah, that's a good point there, Jeremy. Jeremy Gallman says, would help get bigger tournaments to the lake, time for it to go. It would... in my opinion, it would definitely make the tournaments more challenging, because we see it all the time where guys come in and, they end up with 2 fish, even though they may have caught 25 or 30 because they caught a bunch of slots. I mean, we've all been there. There's no doubt about it. So that's why I wanted to discuss it. My good friend Pat Gunderson says, I believe it will work to remove it. I think so. And if we see a decrease in the fishery, then, they can come back in and change it. All right. So fast forward to 1993. So Texas implemented the slot. Let's see if I can keep my notes right. 14 to 18 with a 3 bass creel. And in June of 93, Louisiana modified the slot limit to be 14 to 17 with a 10 bass creel. 4 could be over 17. So that's in June of 93. Then in September of 95, Texas increased their creel with their 14 to 18-inch slot to a 5 bass creel. Let's see. Yeah, Paul Funk says the old slot monster awarded is a 0 Saturday. All right. Anyway, so fast forward to October of 2010, Louisiana and Texas met again, and they concurred, they agreed on uniform regulations for the slot. And then, lo and behold, September of 2011, we basically have what we call the reciprocal slot, or the unified slot. So Texas and Louisiana both, it's 14 to 18-inch slot, 8 bass creel total. That actually includes spots, by the way. 4 fish over 18 inches. And so that's where we are today, since 2011. I'd also like to remind y'all, for those of you that are watching that may or may not know, of course, Louisiana and Texas have a reciprocal agreement on fishing licenses too. Your Louisiana license is good to the 43 bridge up Big Cypress. And according to the two Texas game wardens that I talked to, don't fish under that bridge with your Louisiana license. That means up to the bridge only. Because there's a couple of agents up there in Texas, in East Texas, that patrol that they're not very forgiving once you get under that bridge with your Louisiana license. Okay, so any questions so far about the slot? I mean, what do y'all think? Should it be removed? Do we need to leave it? Is it really helping the lake? I mean, again, Caney Lake's the proof right there that, the slot is not 100% necessary because they pulled the slot off of Caney, which was fairly restrictive. And, it's starting to produce some pretty good fish again. All right, now, let me show you where I got some of this information. So let me clear this off the screen. All right, so where I got the information for the slot was the history of regulations. I don't know if any of y'all are aware, but the Wildlife and Fisheries has a really good resource online. They have what they call their inland fisheries reports. And it's on their website. Honestly, sometimes it's not that easy to find it. So I'm going to pull it up on the screen. I always just go to Google and type LDWF inland fisheries, and it usually pulls that up. But let me flip screens over here, and I'll show you. Let me kind of resize this a little bit. Okay, and again, I understand it may be a little hard to read, you know, if you're watching on mobile or whatever. But if you take a look at this, they have inland fisheries reports for pretty much every body of water that they deal with in the state. And it's not the easiest thing in the world to search through, but pretty much if you scroll down to the bottom of the page and just follow the page numbers, you can go on up. They've got Cypress Lake, of course, Black Bayou at Halston's in there, Caney Lake's in there, of course, Caddo, Cross Lake, and all that. So you can get some really interesting information, including their stocking rates for the Florida bass. And so a lot of times people say, yeah, but they hadn't stocked them in forever, when actually most of the lakes have been stocked relatively well. Now, I'll say on Caddo, Texas has stocked a lot more than Caddo has, than Louisiana has, but it is getting stocked by both of them. They also, let's see, cut 10. Oh, yep. So I'm skipping around here. Bear with me just a second. Let me go back over here. All right, so anyway, that's the history of the regulations and all that. I also want to show you, let me get this out of the way and this out of the way. Let's go to cut 10. So I also wanted to address one other thing on the slot limit. Yeah, I agree with you, James. James Boggs says, looks like to me it's 10 years behind. Let's remove it. I would tend to agree. And speaking of the slot, so the general rule that I tell everybody is if it's touching 14, it's in the slot. If it's touching 18, a hair over, then it's out of the slot. And of course, you can keep up to 4 outside the slot or over the slot, what we call overs. Well, I did clarify, and this is straight from the Wildlife and Fisheries. Notice where I've got it highlighted right there, the 14 to 18 inch slot limit, and this is for those of you that are on your mobile or that are listening once I release the podcast audio. All bass that measure from 14.0 to 18.0 inches must be released immediately. And then, of course, there's an 8 fish daily bag limit in aggregate with spots. No more than 4 can be over 18 inches. So, you know, there is variation in the bump boards that we all use. Most of us have the golden rule, but we've all seen the videos, and I've actually compared a few before, and there can be as much as a 1/4 inch difference even in the golden rule boards sometimes. Most of them are pretty accurate or pretty consistent, let me put it that way. So there is a little variation. I'm just saying that my rule is I want the fin touching the 18 inch mark on the right side of that 18 inch mark. In other words, I want it to be just slightly over 18 inches just in case. Also, again, for those of you that might be, you know, relatively new to fishing or whatever, remember bass tend to shrink in the live well a lot of times. So if it's right there at, you know, 18.01 inches and you get to the weigh-in, that fish might actually be inside the slot barely. So you always want to be careful of that as well. Let's see here, Mr. Gunderson. Mr. Pat Gunderson also says, if the slot worked as well as the fish in parks thinks, we would all be catching at least 2 to 3 overs every weekend. But the truth is half of the teams in a tournament, usually 0. Yeah, and I would, again, for the slot to work, we've got to be keeping some of the overs. And I'm the first guy that releases everything I catch. Over, under, doesn't matter to me. But it's a very interesting situation. And it makes it really kind of, I don't know, it's not, to me, it's not as competitive in the tournaments because we're skipping a whole range of fish that you're not going to win 99% of the time on Caddo. You're not going to win with a bag, you know, a live well full of slot fish, but it would definitely change the top 10 in most of the tournaments, and in my opinion, make it competitive. You know, maybe I'm a little biased because it really aggravates me when I go up there one day and catch a whole live well full of overs and then go up there the next day and, you know, I don't know, the wolf pack of slots has moved in and, you know, they all all seem like the big fish shrink down to 14 to 18 inches then, so it aggravates me too. Jeremy, that's a good point. They removed the slot from cross, and it certainly hadn't hurt it. Dan Fulgham says, if Texas refused, we would want to split the law again. I'm not necessarily saying split the law because that introduces its problems, but yeah, probably would definitely make it interesting. All right, so let me move forward a little bit more here. Let me show y'all what the women's bass tournament did. The Lady Bass Anglers Association, if I can think of it, what they did for their championship back in 2019. So they used what we call paper fish. Now, this isn't the exact chart that they used, and again, I know it's a little fuzzy to read, but this is one from LureNet. And what it is, it's just a cross-reference chart. So, for instance, in this particular chart, they have a 15-inch fish listed at 1.83 pounds. If it's 15 and a quarter, it's 1.93. Let me put my little marker there so you can see where I'm referencing. If it's 15 and a half, they've got it as 2.03, and there's actually a formula for length and girth that these are calculated by. If it's a 15 and 3/4, 2.14. 16 inches, 2 1/4, so on and so forth. Now, I know there are variations in fish. You know, girth makes a big difference. You know, sometimes we catch skinnier fish, etc. I understand that, but this gives a baseline for what we call paper fish. Think of it kind of like the kayakers do. You know, the kayakers measure by length, but they have a paper chart that, you know, they can help use for the calculations, but they're measuring their fish and taking pictures or whatever their rules are. Well, here's what the women did. So let me pull this up. Here we go.
How many? I got a sack full, right?
I got my limit.
Paper fish too.
Paper fish and a few little swimmers here.
All right, on the board is 207. 207. So we're gonna
All
have the paper fish. Here comes Lisa.
So notice right there, she's got 2.07 on the scales, but he referenced the paper fish. Now the way that they did this is they had the pro in the boat, and then they had a co-angler. So the check and balance was any paper fish, the co-angler had to view the measurement and sign off on that. All right, so that was their check and balance to help prevent, you know, any potential for cheating on that. All right, but look at the difference that it made, because she's 7 pound. Alyssa was 7 pounds different from Lisa in the red shirt. All right, so watch this.
All right, let's see what paper fish you're going to do for her.
All right. So the tournament director's checking to see what she had as far as paper fish.
Show the weight. 971, the total weight. Oh, my. 971, we knew it was going to be closing it in. Oh, my. Woo! Lisa Johnson, come here a minute. Come here. While she's grabbing
I'll watch.
Fish, you tell me your thoughts for this day.
So she came in with these two little fish, two unders. But because of her paper fish, she was able to go ahead and win the tournament. Now, let me tell you something. Melissa can catch some fish. I actually had the privilege to video her for 2 days, and that girl can catch some fish. Matter of fact, little tidbit, when you're running down Boat Road G over there between Potter's Point and Tar Island Slough, when you get to G14, that marker is tilted over. The reason that marker is tilted over at an angle is because Alyssa hit it with her skeeter on like her first day of practice, cracked her boat. They actually duct taped her boat, literally with black duct tape to keep water from coming in. Luckily, it was right there at the rub rail line, and she continued to practice, went on and fished the tournament. Of course, she was real upset and all that. But anyway, went on to win the tournament. So she's, every time you go by G14, if you fish over in that area, look at that marker. It is leaning over because of this girl right here who won the championship back in 2019 for the Lady Bass Anglers. As a matter of fact, they're supposed to be back on Caddo either, I think it's in April, maybe it's early May, I forget. So they'll be back. I don't think they're having their championship here, but they're having a regular tournament. All right, but the point is, it made a huge difference in her ability to win this tournament. If she had only been able to weigh those two fish, she would have lost by, if my math is right, by about 5 pounds or so. But again, because she had those paper fish, slot fish, she was able to go on and win the tournament. So it can be done with tournaments in the slot fish if we can't, eventually get the slot removed. I just think it would make it a little more competitive, especially, the top 10 places in the tournaments. All right. So, any questions or more commentary about that? James Atkins says, just make the slot tournament exempt. I would agree with that too. Louisiana or Texas, if you could get them to agree to do an exemption for those tournaments, because the fish are getting released anyway. But getting Texas, Louisiana may go for that, I don't know, but getting Texas to agree to it, that may be a little bit of a challenge. So, good idea, and I agree with that as well. Again, the paper fish is better than nothing. It is a little more effort. It's not going to be as accurate, but I don't know. Anyway, it's a possibility for some of y'all that are running tournaments and holding tournaments out there. Okay, has anybody guessed what these fry were? Anybody figured that out? Have I had the correct answer? Let me scroll back up through the comments for a second. So I'm going to give you one more quick look. I'm not going to roll the whole video here. So we got catfish, baby fry, catfish, bass fry. So I'm going to give you one more look. There's the mama fish. She's actually at the base of that ball of shad. And there she is right there inside of my cute little magnifying glass deal. All right. We will reveal it towards the end of the show. All right, so that covers removing the slot. So let me put a little check box by that so I can kind of keep track of what we've got going. And if y'all want to talk about anything else, feel free to comment away. Or if you got my mobile number, feel free to send me a text. I do check that during the show. All right. No, Pat, not yet. Let everybody guess. We do have Tim Eves Jr. guessed. He said grinnell. So we've got bass, catfish, and grinnell. And no, Pat, that would be cheating because you were actually, we were in your boat when I shot that little video clip. Okay. Let's see here. One more thing about the mapping. I think I started talking about that, but I think I kind of got off track. So the maps that I released on the Caddo Lake Fishing Report, I'm going to do something even better. I'm actually in process, but it's going to take a while. So, a lot of folks that go out there, they don't necessarily have a nice Humminbird unit or a Garmin or a Lowrance with a really good mapping. They might be a first-time fisherman. They might be in a kayak or canoe or whatever the scenario is. So what I'm doing and in the process of doing is I'm creating a Google map that's going to be freely available. I'm taking my Atlantic map and paper copy and all that, and I'm putting the area names on it. I'm going to try to get the GPS locations of all the boat markers on the Louisiana and Texas side. If not, I may spend a couple of days on Caddo and just waypoint every one of them and get those plotted on a Google map that anybody can access from your phone, as well as these areas that we talk about, like, Wangdoodle Pass and all these other places that we talk about, and, Turtle Shell and areas that a lot of us know, but a lot of the new people that come fish don't necessarily know. Now, I know I'm going to catch some flack for that because there's a pretty good group of anglers that don't want people to know some of these areas. But I've kind of got a completely opposite tact. I like to help people out. I just do. And it's not like I know every place on the lake either. I'm honestly still learning Caddo. I fished Caddo back in the 90s, back when there were hardly any boat markers. And then I didn't fish Caddo for a long time, probably a decade or more. And long story made short, my best friend for, nearly 40 years, Mike Davis, got me involved in the high school fishing league, doing their social media and video. So then I decided, I'm going to get back into fishing again. So my neighbor down the road had a Champion, a 203 for sale. So I bought that from him, used. It's a work in process, but it fishes. And Mike showed me a lot of Caddo, but most of it I've just learned. And I've been fortunate enough to be able to show some other people, how to run Caddo and all that. And I just feel that by helping people learn the lake, it's going to make it safer overall for everybody. So anyway, as I'm beginning to do that, y'all, stay tuned to the Facebook page. If you hadn't liked or followed it yet, like or follow the Outdoor News Facebook page. Do the same on the YouTube side if you have a YouTube account. And I'm going to get feedback from as many people as I can about, building this map. And again, it's going to be released, freely. And you can download the waypoints. You'll be able to do all that, whatever you want. Bring it into Google Earth if you have that and use that or whatever. And you can bring, eventually you'll be able to bring some of these areas in on your Humminbird or your Garmin or your Lowrance if you want to, if you know how to do all that. So anyway, that's coming down the pipe too, but of course it may be months and months before I get that completed. But once I get it to a point where I'm comfortable releasing it, then I'll release a link. And anyway, y'all can do what you want to with it. Let's bring Dan's comment up. He says, the missing channel markers have been contracted and bid on. If bid is accepted, work will begin soon. 3 have been reported. They are miles apart and will take some time. 61 up the bayou is one of them. Yeah, there were some reports on that, and I think in the Caddo Fishing Report or one of the Facebook groups the other day. So thanks for the update, Dan. I appreciate that. Matter of fact, Dan, we need to get you on maybe the next show or something like that, and we'll do a little beforehand practicing on how to come in as a guest, and we'll talk about the tagged fish and all that you've got going up there on the lake, and get some catfish reports from you too. And that's one other thing before I move on to the LHSAA and all that. I primarily bass fish. I go white perch fishing and brim fishing a couple of times a year. I'm pretty much a bass fisherman, so what I'm going to try to do is get some guests on and reports from people on the catfishing, the brim, the white perch, the crappie, and all that. Again, not just from Caddo, from other area lakes as well, and try to report on that as best I can. If you would like to be a guest, or if you're a guide, or you fish frequently, or you're giving live scope lessons, you want to come on the show and talk about that, just send a message to the page or send a message to me directly on Facebook or whatever, and I'll be glad to talk to you about it. And, all you got to do is have an iPhone or an Android, a halfway decent interconnection. You can come on with a computer, couple of little technical things, or you can call in with a phone number and be a part of the show. And so as I progress, as long as we keep people watching and all that, I'll try to make it as interesting as I can. Okay, so let's get into this LHSAA and high school fishing. And I think this is going to be interesting for a lot of you. Even if you don't necessarily have a high schooler, you'll find this interesting because a lot of us know folks that even if we don't have kids in high school, we got friends or family members or whatever that do, and they're fishing the high school league here or the Bass Nation, high school deal or whatever. So, and some of y'all, I'm sure, have probably seen the recent news with the name, image, and likeness controversy with the LHSAA. So I'll just talk briefly about that. So the LHSAA, first of all, is a private organization. That's it. They're 501c3, but they're not like some state agency. They're not. They're a private organization. The thing about them is they just have no competition, none. And so that's why all the football and baseball championships, and Jeremy, you know more about the wrestling side of it, wrestling championships, whatever, are all sanctioned and done through the LHSAA because, well, they're the only game in town. Now, how does that relate to high school fishing? Well, you might find it interesting that just a couple of years ago, the LHSAA started making moves into high school fishing. In my opinion, it's nothing but a money grab. They see the sponsorship money flowing in, and they decided to get in that game because the LHSAA brings in, as of 2009, almost $1 million a year in corporate sponsorship. So let me switch my screens here, and let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of this, and let's bring this up. Okay. So I've also got, let me see if I can find their financials. we'll start with this slide. Okay, so this is a Shreveport Times article from 2019. And you can see I've kind of got it highlighted here. Again, it may be a little small, so I'm going to read it to you. And for those of you listening to the podcast, this is a quote from Adam McDowell, who, at least at that time, I hadn't talked to him in a couple of years, was, pretty much head of the LHSAA or whatever his title was. But anyway, he did this interview with the Shreveport Times and says, high school bass anglers who receive cash awards for competing in tournaments could be ruled ineligible to participate in LHSAA-sanctioned bass fishing tournaments in the future, according to LHSAA spokesman Adam McDowell. Now, here's what that means. All these high school kids, or junior or whatever age they are, it doesn't matter. If they go out and they fish a jackpot tournament or any other tournament around here and win money, because sometimes the tournaments, they'll split the check between the two anglers and they'll make one out to the kids or whatever. That can disqualify them from football or from baseball or tennis or wrestling or whatever else their particular school is participating in with the LHSAA. So think about that for a second. It's not just about a high school, the North Louisiana High School Fishing League sanctioned tournaments or the Bass Nation tournaments. It's any sport. If they go play in a ping pong tournament and win money, they could be ruled ineligible. And you think, well, that'll never happen. Well, we're going to see here in just a second. So he also says, regardless of LHSAA adoption of bass fishing, we have long-standing bylaws in place governing amateur status and eligibility to participate in LHSAA competition. Adoption of bass fishing would not change that. He says that there is no issue with a student competing in a tournament winning a prize, such as a rod and reel, tackle, or clothing. Scholarships are also permissible, but cash awards paid directly to a student or indirectly to a parent would be a problem. So I want y'all to understand and realize that. Look, I'm not calling the LHSAA and reporting any of the kids. I really can't stand the LHSAA and think somebody else should start another organization to compete with them. But I just want y'all to be aware of this because this was a huge controversy just a couple of years ago, and it's still ongoing. It hasn't changed. And we're about to listen to a phone call with Adam to make sure that this article from the Times has it clear. All right, so let's switch screens here. And you can see here, directly or indirectly receiving pay or financial benefit in consideration of as a reward for participating in any sport in any public competition or exhibition or disposing of prizes for personal gain. This is out of their bylaws. Directly or indirectly receiving pay or financial benefit in consideration of or as a reward for appearing in person at any competition, exhibition, or exercise in sports other than officiating or instructing in a recognized recreation program. So again, it's not just about fishing, but fishing is just where I became aware of this. So if you don't believe all that, let's listen to an actual phone call with Adam that I had back in, I think this was 2018 or 2019, but here we go.
Well, that's basically fishing for a bass tournament that's got, got some kind of cash prize at it. So
Gotcha. Okay.
there are basically two types. One are typically held on the weekends on a Saturday or Sunday. Then there are also tournaments, smaller ones, that are done sometimes during the week. For instance, an evening type tournament and things like that might be a 3 or 4 hour tournament.
Gotcha. Well, just to give you some information, our eligibility rules, and I think the misconception is between high school amateur status rules and NCAA amateur status rules. So let me start with NCAA. So if you take Joe Burrow, who's our LSU quarterback, Joe Burrow can go in one of these bass fishing tournaments and win $100,000 and still be eligible for NCAA football.
Right.
Because in the NCAA's amateur status rules, if the NCAA doesn't sanction that sport, then it doesn't matter if those student athletes participate and make money in that sport. He could also go gamble because professional gambling is not sanctioned by the NCAA. High school amateur status absolutely nothing to do with bass fishing. And that 1.2025 rule, maintain amateur status, which I'm sure you have the copy of it because I gave it to that Shreveport Times guy, says, directly or indirectly receiving pay or financial benefit in consideration of or as a reward for appearing in person at any competition, any exhibition, or any exercise in sports, other than officiating or instructing. So basically, otherwise working as a job. So whether the LHSAA sanctions bass fishing or not, our student athletes who participate in high school sports and any other sport at their high school would technically be ineligible if somebody reports that they are winning money in any competition, exhibition, or exercise in sports. Where we differ from the NCAA, so people are confusing high school amateur status rules with NCAA amateur status rules.
Well,
so adding bass fishing
it's
has
not
nothing
just
to do with whether or not these kids would be ruled ineligible in our other sports.
Well, it's not just that. The confusion's always been what's classified as a sport. So one of the challenges for bass fishing over the years has been whether it's actually classified as a sport. I'm putting that in quotation marks. So let me give you an example, another example then. So a 4-H club goes to a calf showing competition where there are cash prizes available and a student wins money. Is that considered a violation of LHSAA rules, assuming that school is a member of the LHSAA?
And if they are registered and participating in other sports, according to our Rule 1.25, yes, because we receive the same information with CrossFit competitions.
Right.
So we have high school kids who we have asked them to pay that money back to reinstate their eligibility, and we've done that twice now.
Okay.
Because they're shown on Facebook holding up a $500 check or a $1,000 check for winning some, mom and pop CrossFit competition.
Okay,
and
so
then people turn them in. So theoretically, somebody could turn in any one of these kids that is in a bass fishing tournament, even though they're fishing with mom and pop or dad or uncle, and they win a $1,000 check, and it's written out to Alan Smith, who also happens to be a bass player for Parkway High School.
mm-hmm.
We have an issue. So, it doesn't. Now, are people looking for that to happen? No, probably not. Could it happen? Sure.
All right. So that's the LHSAA's position on it with high school fishing. So again, it's not just about high school fishing. It's high schoolers fishing any tournaments, or again, it could be a ping pong tournament for that matter. So that's their position. I don't agree with it. I think they need some competition in the marketplace. I don't agree with them getting involved in fishing at all because I see it as they're just looking for the sponsor dollars. But what do you think about it? Any thoughts on that as we're starting to wind the show down? Let me know in the comments. Shoot me a message or whatever, even after the show, and let's chat about it. Okay, so a couple more quick things. I want to show, of course, I fish the frog a lot, but what I want to do, and I'm going to test this out and see if this works for future shows, I want to show you an example of one of my frogs. So let me get this set up here. All right, let's see here. Give me just a second and I'll switch cameras here and we'll see if we can. I'll see if I can make this turn out nicely. All right. So let's see if this works. Okay. So what I'm showing you here, and of course I've got it sideways, is this is one of my frogs, and I know it may not be perfectly in focus, so bear with me as I get used to doing this. I never tried this on a live show, but this is one of my frogs after I've done what I call retiring the frog. And as you can see, it's got some pretty good scuff marks. Matter of fact, let me try it this way. You can see all those scuff marks are from fish, from bass hitting it. This is the famous red ear frog that I love so much. And generally speaking, I can average, most of them I fish straight out of the package. I might trim the legs a little bit, or sometimes I'll offset trim the legs to make it a little easier to walk around a tree. But I fish them almost straight out of the package. And I can average about about 35 to 40 good fish before I have to retire a frog. You can see the nose of this one was eaten up pretty good. This particular frog caught a lot of fish. A lot of fish. Matter of fact, I don't know if Shane Nugent's watching or not, but this is the one that we fished on that rainy day when we caught all of them. Again, you can kind of see all those teeth marks there. Okay, so there is a frog tournament coming up on Caddo. I don't have the page pulled up right now, but I think somebody shared it out in the Facebook groups and all that. But I think the catch is with that one, you have to fish a snag-proof frog. So might be interesting. How many of y'all are planning on fishing that? I think it's this coming up weekend. As a matter of fact, I'll have to run and see if I can find some snag-proof frogs, and might be pretty fun to actually fish that. All right. So Jeremy Gallman says the LHSAA just wants money. It's a money grab. They are one and done with tournaments. They won't even have a tournament this year. Apparently, they didn't get enough sponsorship money out of it, Jeremy. Dennis Johnson says Saturday, talking about the snag-proof tournament. Does anybody know who carries snag-proof frogs around here? Interestingly, I started fishing a snag-proof frog back in the 80s. Guy that I knew was a tackle rep back when I was a teenager. Anyway, long story made short, he was a tackle rep, and he repped for snag-proof. And he showed me, we used to take the old original snag-proof frogs that had terrible hooks. We'd cut the legs off and run spinnerbait skirts through them, put BB sinkers in there to weight them down a little bit, and then super glue the skirts where they would simulate the legs. And, you know, that's kind of the forerunner, I guess, of the snag proof. Of course, of the Spro frogs that I like, excuse me. Of course, the Spro frogs, much better hooks and all that. But so I hadn't fished a snag proof in years. I got to find somebody, and go get me some snag proof frogs. I may fish that thing this week or this weekend on Saturday. All right, so let me go back. Let's look at the mysterious video again, and I will reveal what it is. I think we have had one correct answer, and that was Mr. Let's see. Let's put this up. Mr. Tim Eves Jr., if you're still watching, you were correct, sir. That is a grinnell, otherwise known as a shoe pick or a bowfin. And you can see her. She's under that school of fry. She's protecting them. You can see her when she comes out, and I put that little magnifying glass. She saw us, and she was literally challenging us. A lot of times fish that are on the bed will do that sometimes, especially if you ever go up like to Missouri and all that, Lake of the Ozarks, and go fishing for smallmouth during bed fishing, sight fishing season. Those smallmouth will literally swim up and challenge the boat. So we did have one correct answer. Of course, Mr. Gunderson knew it. He actually saw the grinnell there. We were in his boat, in his skeeter, fishing, that is, up in Big Green Break. There were several of these schools. Not every one of them had a grinnell under it, but a couple of them did. You can see her right there, see her white mouth that she's showing us. In other words, hey, stay away from my babies. And there she is right there. It's a pretty good sized grinnell, too. That would have been a heck of a fight. All right, folks. Well, I'm going to go ahead. We've been online now for an hour and 6 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and kind of wrap it up for the first show. I appreciate everybody watching. We stayed between 19 and 25, 27. I think we may hit 30 people watching, so that's not bad for the first show. Again, I appreciate everybody watching. Go like and follow the Outdoor News on Facebook. Like it on YouTube as well if you want to do that platform. Hit the notifications button, hit the subscribe button, all that kind of good stuff. I'm going to try to do this maybe not every, but most Monday evenings around 7. I'm going to get into some talking about tackling different things as well. I plan to have some guests on, and I've got the capability. I can actually do this live from the water if I've got a cell connection. I can bring in guests from the water, if we want to shoot something a little earlier and then bring it into the live show. Trey, it was a grinnell. It was a grinnell in there. And you can go back and watch the replay later. The live show will stay on the page, so if you missed anything you want to go back and review, hey, just go back and I'm going to leave them all up there. Again, they're also on YouTube. The website is theoutdoor.news. No .com, none of that. Theoutdoor.news. It is absolutely under construction. Like, I got the logo on there, and that's about it. But in the next couple of days, there's going to be some pretty good progress on that. And so I'm going to try to put a lot of information there. Hey, Mr. Gary. So, yeah, Gary Joyner's on. He's from down there in the Caddo Lake area. Thank you for that, Mr. Gary. I had fun so far just doing the first show. This was kind of to test the water. And, yeah, we may bring you on as a guest maybe next show, too. I can have up to 5. Well, actually, I can do more than that guests at one time. But we could bring a guest on for, say, 10 or 15-minute segments, and absolutely we'll talk about Caddo Lake as well. So I'll be in touch with you sometime this week, and we'll try to set that up. Okay. If nobody else has any questions, I'm going to start wrapping up. Jerry Gallman reminds that there is a crawfish boil at Bayou Outdoors this Friday over there on Highway 80. So anybody watching the show is invited to that. He says $10, all you can eat. That's not a bad deal for crawfish, and you get to go hang out and talk fishing too. All right, folks, that's it for tonight. Again, like, follow, appreciate everybody watching. We'll see you next Monday, same time, about 7 o'clock, and we'll talk a little more about actual fishing, not just everything around fishing. How about that? All right, y'all have a good evening, folks. Thanks a lot.